My partner, who's 25, and I, a 27-year-old, have been in a relationship for around 2 years. The initial months were pure joy, and for a while, I was convinced she was my soulmate. We shared a 2-bedroom apartment, both contributing to our living expenses from our monthly paychecks. I'm a junior sales rep, and she works as a receptionist at a mid-range hotel just a few blocks from my office. It's fair to say we were financially stable and ready to take our relationship to the next level. One day, she invited me to spend a couple of weeks at her parents' place. They were incredibly welcoming, and I enjoyed the mini break, except for the unspoken rule of no intimacy under their roof. However, one thing that intrigued and slightly unsettled me was her close-knit relationship with her childhood friends and their kids. One guy, in particular, David, seemed to pose a potential threat to our relationship. He was a towering figure, standing at 6'2", with a dark complexion and a knack for whispering jokes into my girlfriend's ear, making her giggle. My girlfriend's mother would often tease me by calling him my rival, a joke that didn't sit well with me. This situation started to gnaw at me, so I decided to confront my girlfriend about him. She dismissed my concerns the second time around, assuring me, "You're overthinking it. You're the only one I see." Despite my lingering doubts about him, her words eventually put me at ease. One day, she and her entire family embarked on a week-long Bible camp retreat in the forest. I didn't join them as I'm not particularly religious, and besides, I wasn't invited. She mentioned that some family friends, including David's parents, would be attending the camp. When I asked if David would be there, she assured me he wouldn't be. So, I felt there was no need to worry further. However, 2 days into the retreat, I couldn't reach her. Despite numerous attempts, her phone was consistently off. So I stopped trying and decided to wait for her return. Upon her return, I questioned her about her phone being off, to which she responded, "We were in the woods. What did you expect?" I didn't press further. I also asked if David was present, and she reiterated that he wasn't. For a while, I believed everything was fine. Fast forward 2 months post her trip, I was at a friend's birthday party at a club. There was a familiar face that kept glancing my way until I decided to approach her for a chat. She introduced herself as Angela and mentioned, "We've met before at your girlfriend's dad's place." She was David's girlfriend and had accompanied him during one of our visits to my girlfriend's house. We chatted about various things, and it turned out that I wasn't the only one feeling uneasy about the peculiar relationship between my girlfriend and David. She shared how David had left her alone for a week under the pretext of attending a Bible camp, and she was certain my girlfriend was also there. I didn't confirm her suspicions or mention that my girlfriend had assured me David wasn't present. I simply nodded along with everything she said, feeling too bewildered and betrayed to utter a word. Upon returning home, I decided not to make any hasty decisions. I needed some solid proof to validate my suspicions. So I resolved to check her phone, the only place I could potentially find the evidence I needed. One day, while she was in the shower, I seized the opportunity to snoop. As soon as I unlocked her phone, her messaging app popped up, with David's name at the top of the list. It seemed they were arguing about something, but what? I decided to dig deeper, and there it was. The most significant betrayal I had ever experienced. She had messaged him saying she was pregnant with his child, but he denied it, claiming he wasn't her only partner. She informed him that it couldn't possibly be my child, as per her ultrasound. The timing didn't align, given that we hadn't been intimate during the week of the camp and for a few weeks prior. Moreover, we hadn't been intimate immediately after the camp either, largely due to her own avoidance. He then accused her of seducing him throughout the camp and expressed that he wasn't ready to be a father just yet. After a barrage of insults and angry emojis, they both agreed to pin the pregnancy on me. It seemed like the best solution for everyone, given my love for children and his disinterest in having any part in the child's life. I was so stunned that I'm surprised I managed to take a screenshot of the conversation and send it to my phone before she finished showering. The next day, she dropped the bombshell. She told me she had news, but she wasn't sure if I'd consider it good or bad. Then, she announced that she was pregnant. I wanted to react, to ask more questions, but I knew that would only raise her suspicions. So, I put on a smile, hugged her, and told her it was fantastic news. She left for work that day, happy and completely unaware of the turmoil in my mind. I reached out to a lawyer friend for guidance, and he advised me to request a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. This would provide evidence that I wasn't the father before the baby's birth and before she could list me on the birth certificate. My mind was in a whirl, unsure of how to proceed. If I asked her gently, she'd suspect something was amiss and decline. If I demanded it, she'd flatly refuse. Unable to think of any other solution, I decided to pack my things and leave our shared home. Once she noticed my absence, she started calling incessantly. I ignored her calls and eventually blocked her number. About a week after I left, she decided to publicly announce her pregnancy by posting her ultrasound image on Facebook. She accompanied it with a heartfelt message about the highs and lows of impending motherhood and tagged me in the post. When someone inquired about the baby's father in the comments, she seized the opportunity to slander me, claiming that I had abandoned her and our unborn child. I couldn't stand by and let her lies and manipulations continue unchecked. I needed to act swiftly to clear my name. So, I made a post on my Facebook page, sharing the screenshot I'd taken from her phone where they both admitted that the baby was his and agreed to pin the pregnancy on me. I tagged her in the post and added a caption, "No way, Jose." Within minutes, the post blew up and chaos ensued. She bombarded me with messages on Messenger, pleading with me to remove the post. She begged me to consider our child and not to humiliate her in such a manner. My post was swamped with likes, comments, and my inbox was filled with messages from her family hurling insults at me, as well as from people expressing their concern and curiosity. I stood my ground and refused to take down the post. Why should I? Even David had the audacity to slide into my DMs and say, "Not cool, bro." Not cool? I beg to differ. Trying to pin a child that isn't mine on me, now that's not cool. With the help of her parents, who were desperate for closure and to pin the child support on the actual father, I was able to secure a prenatal paternity test. The court confirmed that the baby wasn't mine, and my lawyer issued her a cease and desist order to prevent her from listing me as the father on the birth certificate. Once everything was settled, we went our separate ways. Now, I'm in a committed relationship with Angela, David's ex-girlfriend. We've both endured so much at the hands of those two, it only seemed fitting that we found solace and love in each other's company. Story 2. I was raised in a quaint town, deeply in love with my high school sweetheart. I envisioned our life together as a heartwarming country song. We were each other's firsts, and had been together for 5 years. I was on the brink of proposing to her. At least, that was the plan. We were supposed to go to the same college, then tie the knot. But all that changed one fateful night when I found her in a nightclub restroom with a promoter. I was shattered, and this incident, along with others that followed, left me deeply scarred and wary of women throughout my adult life. I'll share some of the most distressing, misusive experiences that have left me feeling broken. My then-girlfriend once declared that those who cheat should be hanged. We were watching a movie together when a character cheated on her spouse, and she made this comment with a look of utter disgust on her face. I remember thinking, she's the woman of my dreams. Little did I know that a year later, I'd find her in a public restroom. I never imagined she could cheat on me. Our parents were friends and trusted us implicitly. She could even stay over at my place without them batting an eyelid. Our families were convinced we were destined to be together. However, when she turned 20, it was as if a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, she yearned for the party life, the club scene. But since we were both under 21, we couldn't get into the kind of clubs she was interested in. As an introvert, I was okay with waiting until I was of legal age, but she was insistent on getting a fake ID. I voiced my concerns about the risks, but she wasn't deterred. A few weeks later, she turned up with a remarkably authentic-looking fake ID. When I asked where she got it, she mentioned a guy who had made fake IDs for some of her friends. Despite my reservations, I agreed to get a fake ID so we could hit the clubs together. I was more of a homebody, so the club scene, with its loud music and bustling crowds, wasn't really my cup of tea. But ever since she turned 20, she seemed to have this urge to experience it all. She even labeled me as dull when I expressed my reluctance to join her in environments rife with pills and alcohol. According to her, this was what young adults were supposed to do, and we shouldn't miss out just because all her friends were partaking. Wanting her to be happy, I reluctantly agreed to join her. I even convinced a close friend to come along, and we both ended up getting fake IDs. Fast forward to the next Friday. We had plans to hit the town, but I fell ill and couldn't make it. I assumed my girlfriend would cancel too, but she decided to go with one of her girlfriends instead. I recall thinking that she seemed different, and even her circle of friends had changed. The following week, when I was feeling better, we decided to go out again, this time with my best friend. As we arrived at the club, I was anxious that the fake ID wouldn't pass muster. To my relief, the bouncer barely glanced at it before letting us in. I would later discover that this club was notorious for lax ID checks and was eventually shut down for serving alcohol to minors. Once inside, I noticed a red flag. My girlfriend was enthusiastically waving at a tall, well-dressed guy standing near the entrance. He winked at her, and she responded with a broad smile. When I asked who he was, she casually mentioned that he was just a promoter. I tried to probe further, feeling a pang of jealousy, but the blaring music made conversation difficult. She never answered my question, presumably because she couldn't hear me over the noise. We got our drinks and started to mingle, following the crowd's lead. The more we drank, the more enjoyable the music became. My buddy and I were dancing and having a blast. Suddenly, I realized my girlfriend was nowhere to be seen. I asked my friend if he'd seen her, and he said she'd gone to the restroom. About 10 minutes later, she still hadn't returned, and we decided to explore the upstairs area. We'd heard there was another bar up there with a great city view. We thought we'd take a quick look and then head back downstairs before my girlfriend returned and started looking for us. Upstairs was more of a lounge area, quieter and with comfy couches. It was an open roof, so the noise from downstairs was less intense. As we headed towards the bar, I spotted a woman in the corner who looked a lot like my girlfriend, chatting with the same guy we'd seen at the entrance. I moved closer to confirm it was her, and sure enough, there she was, smiling and engaged in conversation with him. I interrupted them and asked my girlfriend to join us immediately. The guy just smiled at me, while my girlfriend looked annoyed, as if I'd interrupted something significant. I asked her who he was and how she knew him. She replied that she was trying to get us into the VIP section, that he was a cool club promoter, and that he was friends with everyone. She added that he had lots of female friends, so I had nothing to worry about. I expressed my disappointment that she'd left us without saying where she was going, and I made it clear that I wasn't interested in the VIP area. I wanted her to stay with me and not to chat with that guy again. She accused me of being jealous and controlling, which led to an argument. I left her with my friend in the corner and went to fetch us some drinks. When I returned, she was engrossed in her phone, texting someone. My friend then excused himself to find the restroom downstairs, leaving me alone with my girlfriend, who was still engrossed in her phone and not speaking to me due to our earlier argument. A few minutes later, she stood up, ready to leave. I asked her where she was going, and she replied, with a hint of sarcasm, that she was off to the restroom and invited me to follow her since I seemed to have trust issues. I chose to ignore her comment as she stormed off. Now I was alone, waiting for both my friend and my girlfriend to return. After a few minutes, my friend came back, grinning from ear to ear. I asked him what was so funny, and he shared that while he was in the restroom washing his hands, he overheard a couple getting intimate in one of the stalls. We were aware of the wild antics that could occur in clubs, and we both found the story amusing, chuckling about it. But an instinctive feeling nudged me to dash downstairs and see the spectacle for myself. Being a newbie to the clubbing scene, I'd heard of such incidents happening frequently, and had seen posts about it online. I was curious to witness it firsthand. I asked my friend to direct me to the restroom, then I hurried downstairs hoping to catch the action before it ended. Upon reaching the restroom, I had to wait in line for a bit. The place was chaotic, filled with inebriated people, chatting loudly and laughing. There were about 6 stalls, but I couldn't hear any sounds of intimacy like my friend had described. I started to think maybe my friend was pulling my leg, so I decided to use the urinal, which was positioned parallel to the stalls. As I was relieving myself, one of the stall doors swung open. I instinctively glanced over my shoulder to see who was coming out. To my utter shock, it was my girlfriend emerging from the stall. She was adjusting her dress, and right behind her was the promoter, fastening his belt. I was so stunned that I didn't even notice that I had started to pee on my own pants. I yelled out her name, demanding to know why she was sleeping with him. She was taken aback by my discovery and was at a loss for words. She eventually retorted that I was causing her embarrassment. Can you believe that? She had just emerged from a men's restroom after doing, well, you know what? And she had the audacity to say that I was the one embarrassing her. I hurled a barrage of insults at her, causing her even more embarrassment. The crowd around us laughed and jeered as our argument escalated. Meanwhile, the club promoter had vanished without my noticing. I told her to go home with the club promoter she was sleeping with and declared that we were done. I stormed upstairs and informed my friend that we were leaving. He trailed behind me, asking about my girlfriend, but I didn't reveal anything until we reached the car. He was dumbfounded when I told him that the girl he had heard having sex in the men's restroom was my girlfriend. I was in disbelief. How could she do this to me? The image of her emerging from the restroom kept replaying in my mind, haunting me even as I penned down this account. I was fuming and cursing her all the way home after dropping off my friend. She even had the gall to call me, questioning why I had left her at the club. I retorted that her new boyfriend should be the one to take her home. I got home and spent the entire night wide awake, unable to sleep. She kept ringing my phone, but I just let it ring. I should have blocked her number, but it wasn't that simple to just cut her off. At the same time, I was too furious to even consider talking to her. The next morning, she showed up at my doorstep, pleading for me to take her back and blaming her actions on the alcohol and its intoxicating effects. I asked her how many times they had been intimate, and she claimed it was just that once. However, I later discovered from her friends that she had visited that club several times before we went together, which suggested that she must have done it more than once. The breakup left me shattered. I lost my appetite and couldn't eat properly for days. My parents became concerned, and I finally told them about what my ex-girlfriend had done. They informed her parents, who then confiscated her fake ID. This led to a huge argument between her and her parents, which eventually resulted in them kicking her out of the house. Rumors started to spread about her, and people began to exaggerate the story, claiming that multiple men had taken turns with her. I had no idea how or where these embellishments originated. She became infamous in our town for her actions and had to move away. Her relationship with her parents remained strained due to the incident at the club's restroom. The fact that she was known as the girl who got in a men's bathroom was not only humiliating for her, but also for me, even after our breakup. I made the choice to relocate, leaving behind my friends, family, and all the drama. I moved 2 states over to escape the humiliation. I left everything behind and started anew. My plan was to focus on myself and steer clear of serious relationships. I stuck to my plan and spent my college years casually dating without any serious commitments. I was a bachelor, enjoying the company of different girls, and I loved it. After college, I landed a job and put all thoughts of my ex-girlfriend behind me. I never let my guard down because I didn't want to experience that kind of disappointment again. I thought my ex-girlfriend was one of a kind, but she turned out to be the exact opposite. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious ever developed. I would bring girls to family events because I didn't want to attend alone. My family wasn't too fond of the girls I dated because they had tattoos or dressed differently. The girls I was seeing were city girls, some a bit wild, but I preferred them over pretentious girls like my ex who cheated on me. After landing a job, I met a new girl at work who was simply amazing. She completely transformed my life. I didn't see any obvious red flags, so I allowed myself to be vulnerable again. However, after a few months, I started getting this nagging feeling that she might be cheating on me. I was experiencing panic attacks and the like. I brought up my concerns to her, and as expected, she denied everything. A few more months passed without any issues. She had already met all my family and friends. Everyone seemed to genuinely like her, which was unusual because no one had ever really warmed up to anyone I'd dated since my ex, who cheated on me. I took this as a positive sign. Still, it took me some time to trust her enough to let her move in with me. We started living together and everything seemed to be going well. But then, the intrusive thoughts began. She had me convinced that I was losing my mind, to the point where I considered admitting myself to a mental health facility. I thought I was dragging past trauma into my current relationship. I kept trying to reassure myself that maybe it was just my past haunting me and I had nothing to worry about. Everyone else was telling me the same thing. In November 2021, we got a positive pregnancy test. Considering this was my first child, I was over the moon. But then, in December 2021, just a few weeks later, those unsettling feelings returned. I started digging into her social media and was shocked by what I discovered. It turned out she had been cheating on me for about 11 months. I immediately downloaded all the chat logs and accessed every account I could. I didn't stumble upon any concrete proof of physical contact, just the exchange of explicit photos, which, in my eyes, is still infidelity. She had also been sharing intimate pictures and videos of me, even agreeing to threesomes involving me without my consent. Every day, I'd uncover more, and she'd insist, "That's all there is. I have no reason to lie to you." At one point, she even told me I didn't have the right to know. Now, I'm left questioning the paternity of this child. Again, I found no evidence of her physically meeting someone else, and believe me, I dug deep. I'm not sure if I'm being irrational for doubting the child's paternity. At this point, she's still in her first trimester, and the thought of waiting until birth to know for sure is torturous. I want to be happy with her and raise our child, but the nagging doubts are unbearable. I can't believe I'm going through this again. I started to wonder if all women are like this, or if I'm just incredibly unlucky. Clearly, I can't just take her word for it. Even if I were on my deathbed, I doubt she'd tell me the truth. My job has given me a background in interrogation, so I have a knack for detecting lies. But she's a tough nut to crack. It's especially difficult when it involves someone close to you, as opposed to a stranger you know nothing about. I still have a strong feeling she's not being entirely truthful. I was utterly bewildered and didn't know what my next move should be. I left my own house to crash at a friend's place just to clear my head. She pleaded with me to return, but I told her I needed a prenatal paternity test. She argued that such a test could harm the baby. I did some digging online and sent her the information, proving her wrong. After several days of back and forth, she finally agreed to take the test. And, as it turned out, the baby wasn't mine. Once I discovered that, I asked her to leave my house. Her main concern was that she didn't want to terminate the pregnancy due to her beliefs. I questioned her if having an affair was also against her beliefs. She was left speechless. I told her that whether she chose to keep the baby or not was irrelevant to me. What mattered was that she needed to be out of my house by the next day. Apparently, she decided to terminate the pregnancy because 3 months later, there were no signs of her being pregnant. We continued to work at the same place for another 5 months before I decided to look for another job, as she kept trying to reconcile with me. I, 38-year-old guy, was tight buddies with this dude Tony since we were 8. We were like brothers, told everyone we were practically family. After school, we even got a place together, and he was the first one to meet my future wife. He had our backs, promised to watch over us whenever we hung out with him. He didn't mind getting all sentimental with me. We meant a ton to each other. But even with our tight bond, Tony and I had a difference when it came to booze. He hit the bottle every day but kept it in check after work and on weekends. He never slacked at his job or acted irresponsible. So our friendship carried on, and I never brought up his drinking. The next thing I recall is showing up at the wine tasting as a surprise treat for my wife. I gave her a tap on the shoulder and went in for a kiss when she turned around. She was so startled that she smacked me. I chuckled about it, but amidst my laughter, I noticed genuine fear on both of their faces. It was like I wasn't supposed to be there. I started explaining that while I was at work, I couldn't help but think about them and felt it was important to join them. Even though they were trying to put on smiles and avoid looking at each other, they seemed terribly uneasy. They looked sickly, even though they were trying to appear normal. Throughout the rest of the day's activities, my wife tried to act normal, but she was anything but that. She'd say completely random things and point out trivial stuff, all in an attempt to fill the awkward silence. My best friend Tony was disturbingly quiet and kept his distance from me. I decided to spend another night in wine country, so we booked the same hotel room where they cheated. I did this on purpose, driven by their actions, and I was determined to uncover the truth. Since there were 2 beds, I asked them which ones they slept in, and both of them began stumbling over their words. My wife excused herself and headed to the bathroom. My buddy Tony, on the other hand, couldn't keep the truth bottled up any longer. He started by admitting he couldn't bear the thought of not being my best friend anymore. It was eating him up, the idea that he might lose me. I acted like I was perplexed, but deep down, I had a gut feeling that they'd messed up big time. He went on to say they were pretty wasted the previous night, mainly because she was upset about me not joining them. When they got back to the hotel room, she walked out of the bathroom naked and started making advances on him. He couldn't resist, and that's where his words trailed off. Trying my best to keep my cool, I questioned him if they had been intimate. He just swallowed hard. No words came out. I swung a punch at him. It was like a throwback to our roughhousing days as kids, except this time, he'd been with my wife. I felt a deep loathing for him. He stood there speechless, holding his face, while I yelled to my wife through the bathroom door that I'd never trust her again. I stormed out of the hotel room and made a beeline for my car. She yelled after me, protesting, and followed me to the parking lot, but I drove off without her. About 5 hours later, Tony showed up at my doorstep. I had no idea if my wife was lurking nearby or in the car. He begged me to forgive him, swearing he'd never make such a mistake again. I simply replied that, of course, he wouldn't, since he was no longer my friend and wouldn't be a part of any future woman in my life. I shouted that, after all the years, I had believed he deserved my trust and was decent enough not to get involved with her. He went ahead and committed the worst, most unforgivable act he could have. I was so worked up that I even accidentally spat on him. In my fury, I slammed the door in his face because I couldn't bring myself to believe anything he was saying. I didn't keep it to myself. I made sure everyone knew what had transpired. Our circle of friends and family pretty much overlapped. Nobody could wrap their heads around it. After getting a heap of backlash from our friends and family, Tony essentially became a recluse. He holed up in his apartment, didn't step out for a while, and had no one to hang out with. My wife attempted to provoke me with messages, as if it were my fault for not forgiving them for this one mistake. She also tried to gain sympathy by putting herself down, admitting she didn't deserve happiness. I didn't bother responding to any of it. Even though they were both under the influence, when she realized I wasn't coming, it was her responsibility to secure another hotel room. Or, if they had any ounce of respect for me, or self-control, they should have simply gone to bed and pretended the other person was off limits. They let me down on both fronts, and I was done having them in my life. Since then, I've gotten closer to other friends, and I've started dating an incredible woman. She understands the emotional turmoil I've been through and earns my trust day by day. There's no reason for me not to trust her. She wasn't the one who betrayed me. At the time of this story, I was a 47-year-old male police officer with 13 years of experience under my belt. My marriage had lasted for 9 years. My wife was quite the upstanding lady, and maybe she had to be, given that I wouldn't hesitate to apprehend her. Before we tied the knot and she moved from her home state, she used medicinal vape, which wasn't legal in our state. However, she quit using it since she was marrying me. A few years down the line, she'd landed a job as a reporter for CJP News. I was truly proud of her, as was our family. She became a well-known face in our city, and people held her in high regard. We attended gatherings together, and I heard jokes like, "Hide the pills." We just brushed them off with a laugh. It never crossed my mind that she might harbor a bit of resentment for having to give up her medicinal pills due to our marriage. She began acting strangely at home, dropping lines like, "I better not do that, 'cause I wouldn't get away with it," or complaining that I was suffocating her. Despite her having her own life, I wasn't hovering over her constantly. I simply mentioned that she had been getting home later than usual, and she immediately went on the defensive, blaming me for something. This was a shift from her usual behavior. Normally, she was kind and gentle, and things were fine between us. She said and did other things that were out of character, but I just carried on conversing with her like I always did. I knew she'd push back if I tried to bring anything up, so one night I decided to drive to her workplace. She was still somewhere inside the building, even though it was getting late. I flashed my police officer's badge to get access to the security office's cameras. Believe it or not, the guard sitting there was chomping on a donut, watching me go through the footage. It didn't take much time for me to spot a shot of my wife's office. I saw her walk out of the frame, so I had to locate the camera she moved to, which focused on 2 work desks, one of them belonging to AP. He was a guy she had been working alongside for quite a few years now, and like my wife, he was one of the faces you'd see on TV. The donut-munching guard watched along with me as my wife and AP started engaging in physical activity right there on camera. It was a bit obscured, but you could still make out what was happening. Obviously, I was upset, so the guy tried to comfort me. He mentioned there are plenty of other options out there, and with this proof, I could get them fired. I recorded the video on my phone and expressed my gratitude to him. Not surprisingly, I arrived home before she did. As soon as she got home, she attempted to kiss me. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I gently pushed her away, which left her utterly shocked. Meeting her gaze, I let her know that I was aware of everything. Caught off guard, she placed a hand over her heart. Her eyes widened dramatically, and she stood frozen in her tracks. She asked me what I was talking about, but I kept reiterating that I knew the truth, gradually convincing her to confess. Finally, she broke down and pleaded for my forgiveness. She explained that she had been with AP to help him find some sense of purpose again, as he had recently lost his wife and children and was grappling with the emptiness of life. I didn't mince words. I called her out as a cheater and declared that she didn't deserve to be my wife. I expressed that she had let me down, as well as our families. Tears streamed down her face, but nothing compared to the flood of emotions when I revealed my intention to share the video evidence with her boss. Her expression seemed as if her soul had vacated her body. She inquired how I possessed a video, so I explained that I had been at the security office that very night, capturing their disgraceful actions on tape. The look in her eyes and her whole demeanor shifted drastically. She pleaded with me not to share the video, sinking to her knees and insisting she could rectify everything by quitting her job and complying with my wishes. To me, it was all nonsense. The desperate mutterings of my lousy wife, now facing the consequences she had brought upon herself and AP. It was a tough pill for me to swallow, recognizing that she was indeed a mess. For all those years, I had believed she was deserving of my love and care. Yet, the moment she believed she could get away with it, she engaged in an affair and tried to justify it by claiming I had been controlling her. As a final desperate attempt, my wife had her bags ready and pleaded once more for me not to ruin our lives. I expressed surprise that she saw it that way, considering her own actions had led us to this point. It was almost like she had wanted to be with another man by sleeping with him, so now she was essentially reaping what she had sown, right? But my wife disagreed vehemently, swearing she would do anything for my forgiveness. I firmly declined, shutting the door at last. She ended up spending the night in the car, while I informed our family and friends about the situation. I shared the video online, tagging her, and even posted it on the CJP News website. Although it was removed almost instantly, the company that owned the news channel came across it. Both AP and my wife were fired by morning. She woke up to a reality where she was facing divorce, disconnection from her family, and the loss of her high-profile job. None of her friends or family stepped forward to offer her a place to stay, acknowledging me as a decent man and officer who deserved better than what she had given me.